After 3 movies featuring a deformed monster superhero, Troma decided that just one mascot wasn't enough. So they tried their hands at another. If you check out the Troma catalog, you'll notice that the Sergeant Kabukiman series doesn't have any sequels, although I've heard they've tried. I guess New Jersey had their hands full with Toxic Crusaders, and New York was simply too big a place for Sergeant Kabukiman. After all, they already had Jason stomping around, not to mention King Kong and Godzilla. But I'm getting off track. The story goes that an actual Hollywood studio approached Lloyd Kaufman to do a big-budget kids movie, in the vein of the live-action Ninja Turtles films. Why they approached him, I'm not sure, but while making the film, Kaufman couldn't decide whether to make a cute and cuddly adventure film for the kiddies, or to stick to his roots and maintain all the sex, gore, and slime that comes with the Troma territory. What we get is actually kind of a hybrid, and probably the biggest reason why Sergeant Kabukiman fails. It's the reason I think Toxic Avenger 3 came off the same way. Troma movies are best when they know what they're trying to be. It's hard to gauge that when in the opening scene you've got this, and then later on, you've got scenes like this. The box actually states Columbo with a dash of Jim Carrey. I've never seen Columbo, but I'm very much aware of who Jim Carrey is, and the fact that they compare this movie to one of his is kind of insulting when you see the end result. That being said, let's dive in. The story follows bumbling New York detective Harry Griswold, who's trying to solve a murder case. At the beginning of the movie, some long-haired weirdo with a samurai sword hacks up a Japanese guy while he's having sex with his girlfriend, then throws the girl out of a window.
The babes are going to be falling all over you.
Griswold attends a kabuki performance, which is intercut with scenes of an old Japanese wise man undergoing a strange ritual that involves eating worms, although I'm sure this has little significance other than to add to the film's grossness. His pupil is a woman named Lotus, who's frustrated that her grandfather won't pass on his powers to her because she's a woman. When the old man finally comes out on stage, the other performers break out their guns and shoot him. The audience thinks it's all part of the act until Griswold notices that the woman sitting next to him is actually dead. All hell breaks loose as Griswold goes to inspect the body of the old man. Before he dies, he passes on his powers to Griswold, who of course ends up becoming Sergeant Kabukiman. He inevitably gets a visit from Lotus, who explains what's happening to him. That her grandfather was actually killed by the spirit of the Evil One, who we later discover resides in a corrupt politician named Reginald Stewart. Griswold doesn't believe a word of it, causing her to leave. In the park, Griswold's girlfriend, Connie LaRosa, tries to get him to go jogging with her and ends up nearly getting raped by Stewart's thugs. Just the kind of thing you'd expect in a children's movie. After getting the crap beaten out of him, Griswold finally transforms. But I swear, it's one of the longest, most boring transformation scenes I've ever experienced. Not only that, but after he's in full-out Kabukiman gear, the fight still doesn't start. Not until Griswold can give us as much childish comic relief as he can muster. Finally, after doing somersaults and crashing into things like an idiot, the fighting actually starts. His weapons are a complete joke. Can you imagine how offensive this would seem to someone who's Japanese? He uses a sword, and that's fine, but then he's got super powerful paper fans, exploding chopsticks, and deadly sushi. Maybe I'm looking too much into it, but it all boils down to a dull, super cliché action sequence that doesn't amount to a hell of a lot. It would be one thing if there was some gore to look forward to, but this is a pretty clean fight. In fact, it's the tamest fight I've ever seen in a Troma movie. Griswold's girlfriend ends up in a hospital where one of the thugs gives her too much medication, killing her. This sends Griswold in a rage when he seeks out Stewart's men in a church. He attempts to transform, but for some strange reason, he turns into an overweight clown, and a chase ensues. This is one of those scenes that exists solely to amuse the kiddies. It doesn't add anything, and as an adult trying to get some cheap entertainment, this barely qualifies and is simply insulting. After an hour, we finally get the obligatory training montage, where Griswold seeks out Lotus's help. But these aren't the usual training exercises we'd expect. They make no sense whatsoever. None of that wax-on, wax-off stuff. After smacking him in the crotch with a big stick, she forces him to sort out and individually count multicolored rice while he's upside down. This is not training. This is torture. Eventually, Lotus has him read poetry, haikus if I'm not mistaken, and suddenly he's fully trained and ready to go back out into the world to fight evil. There's a rooftop fight, which is actually pretty decent for a change, but it's followed by the absolute worst flying scene ever filmed. Remember in the original Superman movie when Superman flew Lois around the world? Yeah, this isn't that. I just thought you'd want to be reminded of a good flying scene and what it's supposed to look like. After an erotic sex scene, again just for the kiddies, Lotus gets kidnapped and Griswold goes after her. Lotus's prophecy comes true and Reginald Stewart mutates into this weird pile of pus and slime. It's not a Troma movie without a mutation, is it? Honestly, not much happens. All you need to know is the end creature is just plain weird, with these gruesome heads as hands that make out with each other. The creature explodes and Griswold reverts back to his human form. Sergeant Kabukiman is a pretty bad movie, but compared to most other Troma films, it at least feels like a movie, even if it is pretty incoherent. There is some mild entertainment to be had, but it just has no idea what it wants to be. While there is never a true sequel, the character has made cameos in other Troma movies, and he is well recognized by the fans. It goes without saying, Harry Griswold is no Ace Ventura, and as far as Troma movies go, it's pretty average.